Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode 26. As we were thinking about what to talk about, and feel free to chime in anything that if any topics that you want us to discuss.
They can't actually talk to us now.
Yeah, what do you want us to talk about? Well, wait. But we were thinking about what happened on this date. 14 years ago, we both finished the Chicago Marathon on this date. So a little throwback Thursday.
That's right.
And actually, when we were looking up some of the things that were going on at that time, we did the marathon in 2005, 2006. We already mentioned that. David did it again in 2012, and he did some before. But in 2006, when we finished it, the winner of the race actually tripped at the finish line, which is horrible. He was fine. He ended up winning. But it was kind of like slippery and kind of like drizzly and cold.
And there was a problem with that. They have mats that have electric sensors under them for keeping track of time, because you wear a chip on your shoe that tracks you as you go.
Which is nice because then you can track your runner. Did they fit? Did they finish the 10K? Did they finish the 20K? Whatever.
But I think it was the way the street was painted, whatever they used to paint the logo and everything like that on the street as you approach the chute. I think that's what was slippery.
I think it was too.
And there was an issue. I think they changed that in subsequent years.
Because there wasn't really anyone, right next to him. So it wasn't like a race to the finish. So that was kind of crazy. And actually in years past, when we did it in 2005, I believe it was October 9th, then they kind of pushed it back to like later in October. Good and bad. Better because the weather is usually colder and then it's easier to run and not have it super hot. Obviously we started training sometimes like January of the year it was starting. It would be running through all sorts of weather all through the season. So we've run on the Chicago Lakefront. Do you remember that one time when we ran and it was like so foggy you couldn't even see the water?
Yeah, and well, that happened a few times.
Yeah.
And we ran in snow. But that year, if I remember correctly, I think it was 2006. It was later than normal because of some conflicting event in Chicago. Normally, it's around. I think in more recent years, it's usually around Columbus Day.
Yeah. But
the first time I ran it was October 7th. So that was even earlier. That was in 2001. So the year that we ran in 2006, it was kind of cold in the morning.
It was cold in the morning,
which
like
is
in the 30s.
In the 30s, but what the funny thing is, I had forgotten that was the race where the guy slipped, because I don't remember it being rainy. I remember it being cold, but not rainy.
And I remember it being windy. That could be, but when it starts out cold, obviously, as you get warmer and you dress in layers, so at least I did, and then you just kind of throw off your sweatshirt and whatever else, gloves that you need, and they pick up all that extra stuff and they donate all the clothes. But we were thinking about the advantage, and we did it in 2006. Obviously, it wasn't super hot. However, the following year in 2007, we did not do that, thank goodness, because I think I would have been relieved if we didn't have to do it. But it was in the 80s. It was like
Right.
88 degrees that day, and they ended up shutting it down.
They shut it down. I'm trying to figure out what the year. It was on October 7th again.
Okay, so back up.
So it was
it
a
moved
couple
up.
weeks earlier, and it got up to 88 degrees.
Insane.
Which is funny because we're sitting here talking about it and we have windows open because it was so hot today. So it happens.
Yeah, it was 77 today, so that was kind of crazy. And I think I would have been even more disappointed, especially for all the runners. I did read that usually at the Chicago Marathon, there's 40,000 people who are running, so that's insane just in itself. 10,000 that year, since it was so hot, chose not to run. Then after about the 3.5 hour mark, they just kind of like started shutting down the stations, and I think
Right.
they ran out of water, and it was like,
I think they made the official decision to shut it down at 3.5 hours, but I don't think they actually pulled everybody off the course at that point. I think they pulled people off the course who hadn't gotten that close to the end.
although both times I did the marathon, I brought my debit card with me just in case. I couldn't finish, I could get a cab to the finish line and meet you there.
Well, and also, we had those cards. Well, you weren't working downtown in those days, but I had the card for the L.
So you could have just jumped on
So
the
and
train.
I brought that with me because we knew from even before we ran the marathon, we would go and watch other people in the family who ran it. And the trick is, you go down for the start, you see them off, and then you jump on the L and you go to different points.
Which is so fun.
So you can see them, maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the course of the race, and then you try to get back to the end by the time they're finishing. But so I knew that you could navigate by L pretty easily. So
Luckily, we both finished, so we didn't have to
That's
take
right.
public transportation.
That's right.
Towards the end.
Or I guess now you could, since you'd have your phone with you, you could call an Uber.
Yeah.
I don't think we didn't have smartphones in those days.
There's no smartphones, but it could have texted you to say, yeah.
I did have my phone with me.
I know,
but,
because
yeah.
I did text it, because the weird thing about the marathon is you don't think about the vastness of how far you're running until you do, but I mean, until you're actually at the event. And the first year, and even the second year, I think the hardest part for me was realizing that I had already ran by Wrigley Field, and now I'm running by Sex Park in the same day.
Yeah.
Like, who does that?
Right. You start out.
Why would you do that?
You start out going north, and you go actually past Wrigley Field, which is how far north is it? Addison and Clark, basically. So that's pretty far north, and then you go back down into the loop, and then you head west all the way out by Malcolm X College and University of Illinois Chicago, and then you come back east, and then you kind of go on an angle. Well, you go south a bit, and then you kind of go on an angle through Chinatown. Then you come back by Comiskey Park. Comiskey Park is at 35th Street, which is south.
And I believe that's mile 21 or something like that, 22.
Right. And right. Well, it's not always the same thing. The first time I did it, I think it was around mile 20. I mean, they changed the course from time to time, but I think when we were doing it, it was 21 or 22. And then you go through what's called the Bronzeville neighborhood in the Illinois Institute of Technology, and then you make a beeline straight back north under McCormick Place and all the way back up to about Roosevelt Road, and then you make a right turn heading east towards the lake, and then a left on Columbus Drive, and that's where the finish line is. But the problem with that year was because it was so cold, we started out heading into the wind. It was really stiff northerly wind. And then when you make the turn and head south, then the wind's at your back, and it's really great. But the last roughly 5 or 6 miles is you turn around, you're heading back into the wind again, coming back north.
I do remember in 2006 texting you after I did the turnaround at Comiskey, and then going towards the finish line. I'm only at 23. I'm finally at 20 because it was taking me so long. When people say in Chinatown, "Oh, you're almost done," it's like, no, you're not.
That's the worst thing is that, and people, obviously mean to be encouraging, but they'll say, "You're almost there." It always happens when you hit about mile 20, wherever mile 20 is. There's always somebody saying there. And the point is, you have 6.2 miles to go.
Yeah.
That's 10 kilometers. And, you're like, in what alternate reality
Am I almost done?
Is 6.2 miles almost at the end?
Especially at that time, I think I was like I probably could have walked faster than I was running. I was like at a 13 or 14 minute mile. So each mile, obviously, that's a long time still to go.
I'm trying to remember how long that one took me. I know it took a long time. There's a company that takes pictures, and you can order them, and I get emails from them from time to time. Remember when you ran that marathon? You should download the pictures. And there is one of me crossing the finish line. I won't say what the time was on the clock, but the time on the clock is from the moment the race starts. It's not your official time.
Yes, which is also hard because when you start, it could take a half hour, 40 minutes to get to actually begin the race. And when you get to the first mile marker, and let's just say you're a 12-minute mile and it says 45 minutes, you're like, wait, what?
Well, there's the very first start is for the wheelchair racers because they go faster. So they're at the beginning. And then after they clear a little ways away, they start, the foot race, but they have the very first sort of corral is all the elite people who are the men and
And I'm
women.
not sure why we weren't by the
Yeah.
highly elite people.
And then they have
Can you imagine
there's
like
a
leaving
second
in?
there's a second group after them. When we did the last time we did it in 2006, there was there were only three groups as I recall. There were the elite runners, there was another group of people who sort of pre-qualified, and then there was everybody else. But you're supposed to kind of line up according to your time.
Yes.
You know, like your pace per mile.
And I actually have a funny story after that. But
So we were kind of far back, and it probably took from the actual start 35 to 40 minutes
Yeah.
to actually cross the
so
start
you hear
line.
the gun go off and people, and then you're just kind of still standing there, and then still standing there,
Yeah.
and then still standing there, and just like inching up, inching up. But in 2006, since I knew that I was slow, I was towards the back, and which is fine. But this girl came up and stood next to me. She was wearing jeans, a sweatshirt. She had a backpack on. And I was like, "You're running?" And she's like, "Well, I signed up for it." She's like, "I didn't train, but I'm just going to walk it." And I was like, "Okay, that's exciting. I hope that works out for you." But she was at the very end too. But I thought, how do you sign up for a marathon and then don't do any training? Even walking 26 miles is long.
There's a famous story about Joe Strummer running the London Marathon. And he ran it, I think he may have run it more than once. But he definitely ran it. Oh, he ran the Paris Marathon and the London Marathon. Oh, wow. This can't be right. Maybe it is. 82 and 83. He ran the Paris Marathon in 82 and the London Marathon in 83.
Wow.
Not
Does it
very
say what
few
his time
people. I did not look it up. Very few people were running marathons in those days. By the time we got started by the 90s and into the early 2000s,
It had really blown up.
crowds were huge. But that's surprising. I was thinking it was in the 90s, but it was in the 80s. But supposedly, and I've heard varying reports, he drank an incredible amount of beer the night before. And
Is
also,
that carbo loading?
yeah, and also didn't really train for it. And by the way, in 1982, he was like 30, so he wasn't a young person. I mean, he's young, but he wasn't young
Right.
yet,
It's not like you're 18 and
So
drinking. Like,
it's pretty impressive.
It
that
is.
You could drink that much and then run a marathon. I don't recommend it.
and we were trying to think of people in our family. We're not the only ones in our family who have finished a marathon. David's brother Paul has run it many times. His sister Margaret, her husband Ed, have run it many times. Even before you started running, or me,
Ed
I
was the
started
one
running.
who started it all.
Yeah, Ed is the one who started it all. Although
He's the one to
they're
blame.
also kind of crazy because Ed, on his 50th birthday, wanted to walk 50 miles.
And he did.
He did with his wife.
He's also the one who was there was a show on public television, local public television, called Wild Chicago, where they featured all kinds of off the wall things, crazy art installations, and strange businesses and things like that. And they did a feature once at the marathon, and they were interviewing people that ran, and they interviewed my brother-in-law, which is classic Ed, and he said my favorite thing was I don't know how he was pretty far into the race, I think, but he turned.
So they interviewed him during
while
the race.
he was
Oh,
running.
okay. I thought it was at the beginning.
He turned to the reporter. He said, "My family thinks I'm only doing the 5K because there's a 5K. I don't know. It's either the night before or maybe it's this. No, I think in those days I think they ran the 5K
That
at the
is
same
hilarious.
time.
That's so classic Ed.
But it was so they'd start the marathon when everyone finished, then they would do this 5K race for people who just want to run a 5K. So he said, "My family thinks I'm running the 5K," which was
And they're
pretty
like, wow, it's taking a really long time. And then our niece Alex has also finished the marathon. So if any of our family is watching this, if we missed anybody, just let us know. That's always been a fun thing for us in the past is after the race, going to Kitty O'Shea's, having
bar.
beer, and
You have to
having
drink Guinness after.
a huge
marathon.
burger, which is like so amazing after that. So we just wanted to share our Throwback Thursday to you and just reminisce about just like a huge accomplishment, I think, for us. But we'll definitely talk to you next time. Have a great night. Thanks.
Bye.